when you don't have a clear-cut roadmap, and that's what we call an IPS, an investment policy statement, that is specific to you based on your goals, your resources. When you don't have that, you're possibly not putting away money. Oftentimes, the right thing to do is to take money away, pay yourself, put that towards your savings, which goes into your investment before you start spending, okay? But when you really don't have a plan as to, wait, this is how much I want to be saving, before you know it, if you don't have a plan for that dollar is going to vanish before you know it. And you've probably seen this happen over and over again. So guess what the motto of all of this is? Prepare for and profit from anticipating winter instead of reacting to. This is from Tony Robbins. Makes absolute sense. It's natural for us to want to react to winter and say, oh my God, the sky is falling. But the truth is that if you know what's going to happen, if you understand patterns, then you're able to benefit from it because then you have a plan. You know how to educate yourself to de-risk your plan. And then the final, most important part is being disciplined, which I think is the hardest part, right? Welcome to Generational Wealth MD's podcast on financial freedom through investing in real estate. My name is Param. I'm a mom, radiologist, real estate investor, and mentor to others looking to start or scale their real estate portfolios. The goal of this podcast is to provide you with inspiration, strategies, and insight so that you can stop trading your time for money and live life on your terms. If you love the episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Okay, this is a topic that I am super excited about because I strongly believe that the biggest part of investing is mindset. And we're going to talk about some of the biases that actually throttle wealth creation. You know, as physicians, we have put years, decades of hard work into getting to where we are. And yet we are technically Henry, right? So high earners, not rich yet. That's where most of us are. Most of us are paying multiple six figures in taxes. There was a 2022 Medscape report where they surveyed 13,000 physicians, and only half of physicians reported a net worth of over $1 million, and that was not until the age of 55. I think that's just surprising, right? In some ways it is, in some ways it's not, because we were never really taught to be financially savvy. What we learn through assimilation to what we're exposed to, and there's not a lot of talk about money. But I think the whole financial freedom movement, the mission, is basically to help you think about money differently, right? What if you're no longer able to work? We look at our physician income as security, and the whole concept of financial freedom is to help you decouple your job from your income so that the goal is to get you to the point where your money is making money for you. As Warren Buffett says, if you don't find a way to make money when you sleep, you will work until you die. And in talking to hundreds of physicians, what I've noticed is that consistently, and it's not just physicians, right? This is just basic human psychology. We're all consistently making the same mistakes over and over. At different times, we're probably resorting to one or the other of these 5 patterns. And so I'm going to talk about 5 basic biases or behavioral patterns that I notice. And I have fallen victim to quite a few of these, except for number 2, I think. And I completely understand how it's normal to feel this way, but let's talk about what the major patterns are and what the disadvantage is when we fall prey to that. And then let's talk about how we shift those patterns, right? So the first one that I want to highlight is very simple, but also very common, and it's easy to rectify if you understand it, right? The first one I want to talk about is not having a plan, not having a financial plan. And so when I speak to physicians, and I hear them say, listen, I don't have enough savings. I don't know what happens to the money that comes in. And this could be 2 physician households who are making multiple 6 figures. And I hear this is very common. They're not saving. Sometimes they have credit card debt. And this is not people who are spending money frivolously. These are hardworking people who are very intentional about how they spend money. But they get stuck in this loop of working and having to continue to work to make their ends meet. And then what they say is that, Param, I'm so busy doing this that I don't have any time to think about investing or come up with a plan. So that's one section of people. And then there are the people who say, I don't really have a plan. So any project a friend brings to them, they become angel investors in all of those. A lot of emotional investing happening over there. I've done this. I had a huge amount of money in my savings account. And because in my head, I've been maxing out my retirement account. I'm investing in the stock market. I have individual stocks. I have dividend aristocrats. I have index funds, so I'm doing everything right. Meanwhile, my asset allocation was way off base, right? I've made this mistake too. And what happens is that when you don't have a clear-cut roadmap, and that's what we call an IPS, an investment policy statement, that is specific to you based on your goals, your resources. When you don't have that, you're possibly not putting away money. And oftentimes, the right thing to do is to take money away, pay yourself, put that towards your savings, which goes into your investment before you start spending. Okay. But when you really don't have a plan as to, wait, this is how much I want to be saving, before you know it, if you don't have a plan for that dollar is going to vanish before you know it. And you've probably seen this happen over and over again. You get a windfall, you sold something, you get some money, you get a bonus, it's sitting in your bank account. And if you don't have a plan for it, before you know it, the money's gone. There was a home improvement project, there was something else that needed to get done, it's gone. And that happens all the time when you don't have a roadmap. And so that's the first thing. And how do we correct this? Correcting this involves sitting down with your spouse or significant other and actually coming up with an investment policy statement that defines how much you want to be saving every month. You define what your asset allocation is. How much of my portfolio do I want in stocks? How much do I want in bonds? How much do I want in real estate? And how does this allocation shift over time? Because as you get closer to retirement, that allocation is going to look very different. You may reduce your exposure to stocks and increase your exposure to bonds because you want to weather market volatility. With real estate, you may want to be less leveraged over time. That becomes very important. So how does it shift over time? And I think another important component of your IPS is always going to be, okay, so when the market drops, if it's the stock market or if the real estate prices start dropping, what am I going to do? And you need to write this down so that when it happens, it's not an emotional decision. So those are all components of a solid IPS, investment policy statement, that takes into consideration your goals and your resources and your risk appetite, and that you make along with your family member, and that is written down. That's a big thing. I think when I started pivoting, the most important thing I did was actually write down what I wanted to do, and that becomes super powerful. For those of you who are feeling lost when I even talk about an IPS, we have our 3-day free live event that we do twice a year coming up again in September. It's generationalwealthmd.com/event in lowercase. It's going to be heavily real estate weighted, but we will talk a little bit about asset allocation and how to look at risk returns and what you want to do. And we'll actually have a podcast series coming up soon where I'm going to talk more about asset allocation that's more comprehensive. So make sure you listen to that. I also have blogs on asset allocation. If you go to generationalwealthmd.com and go to the blog section, the first few posts are very generic. It talks all about asset allocation, what yours should be, and how you create your IPS. So definitely take a look at that. And if you don't have one, make sure you come up with one. Okay. Moving on to number 2. The second behavior that I've noticed a lot, and understandably so, is loss aversion, right? When we're overly fearful of losses, and most of our action is based on avoiding losses. And so someone who has this behavior will either invest predominantly in CDs and bonds because they feel very safe, right? Money market funds, things where you get guaranteed income, but that income is super low. That may be anywhere from 2 to 5%. And that seems like it gives them a lot of security. But what is actually happening is that they're taxed on that. They're paying marginal taxes on it. So they're essentially only getting 50% of what they think they're getting. And then oftentimes that drops those returns. So even if you're getting 5% in bonds and 50% of that is taxed, and you then get 2.5%, that's still below inflation. So what's actually happening is that your purchasing power is decreasing. And although you feel very secure in that, is that the right decision for you? There are others who fall prey to clickbait information. And if you're in the investing world and you listen to headlines, oh my God, Airbnb bust, markets crashing, multifamily distress, whatever is really happening is taken. And if there's a small segment of multifamily, and we talked about this in our State of the Market, which assets are actually in distress, right? We've talked about this. It's a small segment of variable rate debt that was acquired between 2021 and early 2022. Whatever it is blown out of proportion. I don't know if you guys have seen the most recent article for Airbnb bust, but there are actual stats over there. But AirDNA and STR Insights, they posted their actual data, which shows the numbers are way off. And the article was heavily exaggerating and manipulating the data. So there's a lot of information out there, and that really does affect an investor who's starting out and someone who's very loss averse. It does affect behavior, and understandably so, right? I mean, when I say investor, guys, you know that I mean all of you, right? All of us are investors. Anyone who earns income is an investor because you're taking your money and doing something with it. If that's putting it under the bed or investing in real estate, whatever that is, you are an investor, right? So when I say investor, that's all of us. And there are those of us where our parents owned an asset class, like maybe stocks or real estate, and however they did it, they didn't do well. There's all that money trauma associated with it. If you come from a background where money was a sore point, where your family was struggling as far as finance is concerned, that can cause huge money trauma. And that can lead to loss aversion. And that leads to the behavior where you're investing in these asset classes where you get fixed income, but you're, like I said, between inflation and paying taxes on whatever you're getting in the interest that you're getting from CDs or bonds, your purchasing power is actually decreasing if that return is below inflation. And Tony Robbins says this, right? He says, you think it's risk-free returns and there's value for risk-free returns, but he says it's actually return-free risks. And I actually agree with him. It's return-free. Your money is not growing in value. In some instances, it may actually be losing purchasing power, right? If your returns are below inflation, it's earning less than nothing. And so that's what's actually happening when you stick to those strategies. There are those who have annuities because it provides them a floor. That floor becomes important to them. My return is not going to drop below 3%, right? Or those who go into infinite banking and whole life insurance policies because they feel like I'm going to get 5 to 7%. And that's good. That's great. Meanwhile, if the 5 to 7% is also not guaranteed. And when you're in that 5 to 7% rate of return, right? What is actually happening is that it's going to take you 30 years to get to financial freedom at that rate. And that's what it boils down to, right? So what are you trading for that safety? That's what you need to look at. Sometimes we tend to over diversify because that gives us a sense of safety. But what actually is happening is that you're essentially ending up diluting your returns, right? So as far as loss aversion is concerned, the truth is that you will never feel good about getting into the market, right? You'll never feel good about it. 2010, which was the best time to invest in hindsight, I'm pretty sure many people felt like it wasn't the right time to invest. 2020, when the pandemic hit and things started crashing, that was a discount. It was an amazing discount. But how many of us actually went in and started flooding our accounts with cash to get that boost? How many of us started really actively purchasing real estate? I remember that's when I went hardcore and started purchasing real estate. That's because I had a plan that would work under any circumstance. And that's what we teach. But there were so many people who were on the sidelines and said the second wave's coming and I don't think you should go in. And if you had an IPS, if you had an investment policy statement that dictated that if markets drop by 25%, I'm going to give an additional boost, and you follow through. Following through is the hard part. I remember talking to a physician who had the software, which apparently was amazing, where it would tell you based on analysis what the right time to enter or exit the market was. And so it was based on timing the market. And I was like, great, we just got out of the pandemic. How did your software do in 2020? Did it actually exceed returns if you'd stayed in the market? And guess what the answer was? It was like, the software did ask us to go in, but we thought the second wave was coming. So we overrode the software and so it performed worse than they would have if they stayed in the market. So what about 2023? Do you think people think this is the right time to get out of the market? Those who are loss averse, there will never be a time where you feel comfortable getting into the market. When you do feel good, when the market's doing great, that's probably the riskiest time to get into the market, as opposed to when you're in a recessionary or recovery phase when things have corrected and dropped a little bit, which is where I believe we are. So the truth is that you will never really feel good about getting into the market. But what I want you to remember, what I want you to take away is that the biggest danger isn't making a mistake or a crash happening right after you start investing. The biggest mistake is staying out of the market, because then you stay trapped in trading your time for money. And that doesn't mean you just go in and use the same strategy in every market cycle. No, you plan when you invest in every market cycle, you plan and you educate yourself to de-risk your strategy. And that's a big part of what we're doing in the event, the 3-day event. Every time we do it, it's different because now we're going to talk about the strategies that you should be focusing on today, right? How do you de-risk your strategy today? Be that for long-term, short-term, or midterm rentals, multifamily, right? Commercial loans. What do you do? And we'll have other physicians join us. This is the first time we're doing that, where people who've been in our program, we'll have them talk about their stories. We'll have them talk about their challenges, their freedoms, and how they've shifted strategies. So you have multiple perspectives, right? So I'm super excited about that. But for those of you who are really risk averse, That's why if you look at our strategy as far as syndications is concerned, GW Capital is where we bring vetted syndication opportunities to the community. How we pivoted is we were never doing opportunistic, high risk, high return deals. We were doing value add deals where we had absolute control over the assets. We're moving into lower risk assets where there's high cash flow from day one, where we're actually going in with a 3% interest rate that's fixed for 7 years. We're going in to deals where the income is double the mortgage payment. And that difference, having a DSCR, that ratio of 2, that gives you tremendous safety. So we're going into safer assets. Anyone looking to dip their toes into real estate in this market environment and looking for a very conservative deal, go ahead and check out generationalwealthmd.com/Indiana in lowercase. That's our latest offering. We are taking people onto the wait list at this time. Okay, so that wraps up loss aversion. What is the next bias we want to talk about? It's recency bias. Okay, so recency bias is when you're making decisions, and that could be to move forward or to step back based on recent events. You're not taking a holistic approach. You're not taking a long-term approach. Remember, sure, a lot of you did this. Well, I did for sure. During the pandemic, and everyone was option trading and day trading. And that's because option traders and day traders were doing amazingly well. And that's recency bias because you're gravitating towards that data instead of looking at overall trends. No one was concerned about how these people did over the last 10 years. All they were concerned about was how they were doing over the last 10 weeks. So that's where you have recency bias, and that doesn't really bode well. What about whenever there's a correction in the market for anyone in my age group who has been through the '08 crash, the 2020 crash, it seemed like it was the next 2008 as far as the stock market, as far as the real estate was concerned. And the truth is that you really need to be investing in all kinds of cycles. And that bias prevents you from making the right decisions, and it causes losses and it causes missed opportunities because that's at front of mind. And what actually happens is that because that's what you're thinking about, that's how you think the next market crash is going to be. You don't really look at all market crashes to say, oh, there's a variety of ways this could go. You just think that it's going to mirror what happened in '08, where things are going to crash and it's going to take a long time for things to get back up. And when investments start tanking, that's when you start panic selling, right? If you remember during the 2020 dip, a lot of people panic sold, right? Even, I believe it was 2022, a lot of people were selling because the market was going down. But then in both of those circumstances, what happened to the market is that it bounced back up really fast. What happened with real estate, guys? Most markets saw a 20% rise in value in 2020 and another 20% in 2021. And no one could have predicted that. No one could have predicted that, which is why it's important for you to continue to invest in all market cycles and not really be affected by recency bias, because those are short-sighted decisions and oftentimes they lead to losses and missed opportunities. Now, if you say, Param, what if I invested right before '08? That would have been a mistake. And that's not really true, because I don't know if you guys were part of the Physician Freedom Summit that we hosted last year. Dr. Corey Fawcett, he did exactly that. He invested in real estate. He bought his first and second, I believe, both of his properties in '08, right before the crash. And as long as you have the ability to hold, you do great. The market recovered. His investments are doing great. I invested during the pandemic when things started getting really bad because it met my criteria. I was sticking to the plan and it paid off. It paid off. And so the thing is, the most important thing is that you need to look at longer term historic data, not just the most recent cycle. You need to look at multiple cycles and you control what you can, right? You absolutely control what you can. With real estate, you can control your tax savings, right? You can control forced appreciation where you're going in and increasing the value of the property and increasing rents. That has nothing to do with the market. You have the ability to control those things, and then you have a strategy for every market. So when recency bias comes in, you remind yourself that market cycles look very different and there's a way to invest in every cycle. Okay, moving on to number 4. This is my personal, I don't know what to say. This is one I'm super passionate about. It's timing the market, right? And here's the funny thing about timing the market. And I have really close friends and family who are constantly telling me that I should be timing the market. I'm sure you get to hear this all the time. You may be the person who feels that it makes sense to time the market. I've heard industry experts say that. So I think we have to accept there are two camps, but I off the camp where I believe that time in the market is better than timing the market, because here's the thing with timing the market. You have to be right twice. You have to be right so if you think you're going to sell high and buy low, you have to time the high and you have to time the low. And I haven't heard of one person to date who has done this consistently multiple times in their career, right? I haven't. And so what happened in 2020? How many of you actually stayed on the sidelines? How many of you, when the pandemic started and the stock market prices dropped, how many of you actually said, whoa, we're near the all-time low. Let me go in and pump money into my stock portfolio or say, oh my God, this is the best time to buy real estate. Let's go jump in. How many of you actually did that? Not a lot of us did that. I did it with real estate, but with my stock portfolio, I think I got swayed because I had people say, what, are you really going to pump money into your stock portfolio? The second wave's coming, which we know how that turned out. But so that was a lost opportunity, but I was still dollar cost averaging, guys. I was consistently putting money into the portfolio. I followed my plan. I just didn't go and infuse. I think part of my plan was also if markets drop by 25%, I go in and infuse. I didn't do that. That was an emotional decision. I'm sure a lot of us made that mistake, but that's why I keep saying timing the market doesn't really work. Time in the market makes a good deal great and a bad deal good. And that's the important thing, right? And so our cost averaging is important. Have a plan, know you can control things, and stick to the plan. Sticking to the plan is the hard part. Over time, remember that the market always goes up, and that's because it's inflation related. It's inflation related, and have long-term goals and adequately analyze the market over the long term and use that data. And like I said before, when the market starts dropping, right? When you are in that recession and recovery, which are the two parts of the curve where you're below your average cap rates for real estate, that's when there's lowest risk to investors, right? And stick to the plan. Don't try to time the market. Guys, that's my honest belief. And I know there are people who say that timing the market does make a lot of sense. And to some extent, that is true. But there is also a strategy to invest in every market. Like I said, the deals we're entering into today are not the kind of deals we would have entered into, say, 3 years ago, but they make absolute sense for today's market because they are a flight to safety. They are a flight to quality. That's our Indiana deal for you. And so I truly believe there's a way to invest in every market. Okay. Last and final point is herd mentality. And I'm sure a lot of you can relate to this, especially since we just came out of the pandemic, right? All of us suffer from FOMO. My 8-year-old son knows what FOMO is, fear of missing out. I think the pandemic kind of brought that to the forefront, right? Cryptocurrency, option trading, I-bonds, GameStop stock, things that we certainly started hearing about so much. NFT, right? Turtles, people buying turtles for, oh my God, I don't know. I don't even know how much, $25,000, $40,000. So you obviously realize that I'm not an NFT expert when I say that. But that being said, there were so many things that were new, right? They didn't have decades of data to back them up. They were new, and there's a tendency for us to really go through all of that FOMO and say what ends up happening because of that is that you end up buying high and then you start selling low, right? And what happens is you end up chasing high returns, and it's completely emotional investing. That is not investing. Emotional investing is speculation, right? It's speculation, it's loss aversion, it's fear. And the right thing to do is to always listen to many opinions, stay super conservative. We're not chasing super high returns. We're chasing consistent returns based on long-term patterns, right? Be intentional about your asset allocation, stick to your investment policy statement. And as far as real estate is concerned, it's always a cash flow game. It's not an appreciation play game. We're not looking at speculation, and just look at long-term data, guys. Just look at long-term. Okay, perfect. So guess what the motto of all of this is? Prepare for and profit from anticipating winter instead of reacting to it. This is from Tony Robbins. Makes absolute sense. It's natural for us to want to react to winter and say, oh my God, the sky is falling. I love Chicken Little. But the truth is that if you know what's going to happen, if you understand patterns, then you're able to benefit from it because then you have a plan. You know how to educate yourself to de-risk your plan. And then the final, most important part is being disciplined, which is the hardest, which I think is the hardest part, right? You can educate yourself, you can have a plan, but being disciplined and sticking to the plan, that's the hard part. That's why I have those two resources for you guys. Those of you looking to build your own portfolios, understand real estate well, generationalwealthmd.com/event. If you don't understand real estate and you're trying to get started and you want to really accelerate to financial freedom, want to break the golden handcuffs, stop trading your time for money, this event is for you. If you have a few properties and you're like, I just want to take it to the next level, I want to save 6 figures in taxes, I want to be adding momentum, this event is for you. You'll hear from me, you'll hear from our members who've done really well. And if you're just someone who's, I want some diversification, and you're looking at real estate for diversification, and I said this in my last episode, I got into real estate for diversification. I stayed in it for the returns. The returns are significantly higher. Their returns are 4 to 5 times higher than what you get in the stock market. If you're someone who's getting started and you don't know where to start and you're looking for a conservative, passive real estate investment, check out generationalwealthmd.com/Indiana. this is our safest deal to date, right? When it comes from a safety capital preservation perspective. So those are great resources. Remember, risk comes from not knowing what you are doing. Those are Warren Buffett's words. The game is to have asymmetric risk reward. You want to increase your returns while decreasing risk. That's the game, right? Don't let emotions get in the way. Who said this? Lance Roberts said this. I listened to one of his podcast episodes, and he said, get your money to work. And you can't just say, go out and make money for me. If you have to put hard hats on them, yellow vests and glasses, and make sure they're super safe, put all of that on your dollars and then send them out to work. Your money shouldn't be sitting in a CD, in bonds, like predominantly, or a savings account, right? Don't make that mistake. Take all the precautions you need to take and then send those dollars out to work for you. Remember, Tony Robbins says this, it's a game of emotional fortitude, right? When you're scared, every rope starts looking like a snake and it starts seeming fearful. And like I said, the hardest part is having that discipline to invest, not being swayed by your emotions. And that's what this episode is about. Don't let your biases get in the way of your wealth creation. Happy investing. If you're thinking that the only path to retirement is working harder, saving more, and investing in the stock market till you hit 65, I invite you to the 10X Your Financial Freedom Through Real Estate experience. This free virtual coaching event from September 7th through the 14th is going to be a game changer. And yes, I know that you can do it even in the current market with interest rates the way they are and even through a recession, because our students are doing just that. And on day 2, you get to meet some of them and hear their stories, how they have used strategies to get to 6 figures in passive income and save 6 figures in taxes in this market. So if you're tired, burnt out, and ready to take back control of your time and income, if you're struggling to get your first long-term or short-term rental and don't want to learn from costly mistakes, if you're ready to go from a handful of rentals to 10xing your cash flow, I'm going to go over my proven framework that I used to get to financial freedom at 41 and that hundreds of our members have used. Plus, we will be figuring out your action plan, taking into account your risk appetite, goals, and resources. We'll also figure out your next step to help you actually move the needle so you can accelerate financial freedom while paying less in taxes and creating a recession-resilient portfolio. I want you to go ahead and register for the event at generationalwealthmd.com/event in lowercase, and I'll see you soon.